Is there a glitch in the sovereign code? I mean, we are looking at a conflict between two laws.
Not a glitch, no. It's a mistranslation of the architecture. We really need to look at the linguistic firmware.
Right. So for 1,400 years, there's been this apparent hypocritical loophole sitting right at the center of a civilization-defining code.
A massive one, yeah.
Yeah, a strict overarching rule that supposedly just, didn't apply to the man who delivered it. But today we aren't arguing theology.
No, definitely not.
And we aren't debating traditional history either. We are running a systemic debug.
Exactly. We are looking at a really dense structural analysis of an ancient text, the Quran, based on excerpts from a work called The Structural Blueprint of Administrative Responsibility Transference.
Right, which was translated and understood by J.R. Ahmed.
Yeah. And our mission today for this deep dive is to look at this deeply historic text, not through, centuries of religious commentary, but by treating it as a flawless living operating system.
A flawless OS. I love that framework. And we're going to use that strict systems-level approach to examine a massive historical contradiction regarding leadership, responsibility, and, well, what history is called marriage.
Right, but we have to establish the parameters of this analysis immediately, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Because this text is, profoundly sacred to billions of people. It carries immense historical and cultural weight. But our role here is strictly analytical.
We're not taking sides.
Right. No personal, political, or theological sides. We are impartially unpacking the author's specific architectural theory. We're looking at the mechanics of the language, the mathematical consistency of its roots, and just mapping out the structural logic presented in this source material.
Basically stepping away from the altar and putting the text under a linguistic microscope.
Exactly.
Which is exactly why this is so fascinating for you, the listener, regardless of your background. Because if you assume the premise that this text operates as a flawless, closed system architecture,
then analyzing it just becomes an exercise in supreme logic.
Yes. You don't need to be a theologian to appreciate this. I mean, if you have ever built a secure network or managed a massive corporate restructuring or even just tried to understand the thermodynamics of human organizations, you are dealing with the exact same variables.
It's the exact same mechanics.
Right. We are looking at how complex systems decode information, and specifically how executive leadership handles the intense sociological friction of absorbing responsibility.
It's essentially a masterclass in organizational psychology that just happens to be written in ancient Semitic root letters.
Which is wild.
It is, because when you strip away centuries of cultural baggage, you stop seeing folklore and you start seeing a highly sophisticated framework for how human beings organize, delegate, and restructure power.
But the premise of treating it like an operating system, that requires us to assume that every variable, every root word, is placed with absolute mathematical precision.
Right, there is no dead code.
No throwaway lines.
None.
So let's look at the bug report. Let's isolate the corrupted data that has caused this supposed system crash for over a millennium.
Let's do it.
Okay, so we are looking at a direct conflict between two specific sectors of the text. In the first sector, we have Surah An-Nisa, chapter 4, verse 3. Now, if we read this as a systemic law, it explicitly restricts the taking of multiple partners.
Right. The Arabic term utilized here is Nikah.
Nikah, right. And the text limits this action strictly to a very specific condition, which is the protection and management of orphans.
Yeah, it's a tight, highly regulated parameter.
Exactly. It's not a general permission. It's a structural safeguard deployed only under specific systemic stress.
It is a profound restriction, really. Because within the architecture of the text, laws are designed to maintain systemic equilibrium. This verse acts as a load balancer for society.
A load balancer, I like that.
Yeah, it restricts a biological and social action to ensure that vulnerable assets, in this case orphans, are structurally protected. It is the exact opposite of an open-ended license.
Right. It's a closed loop, but then, you scroll down the code base to another sector, Surah Al-Ahzab, chapter 33, verse 37.
And this is where the issue appears.
Yeah, because according to the traditional historical manuals, like the commentary written centuries after the fact, this verse describes the reformer, the supreme leader of the community, taking his adopted son Zayd's quote-unquote wife as an additional partner.
Right.
And this is where the system completely breaks down for me. I mean, from a systems design perspective, this is an unacceptable vulnerability.
Oh, absolutely.
If I build a secure network with strict access rules, I cannot give the central administrator an arbitrary backdoor to break the very rules they are supposed to enforce.
Right. It ruins the integrity of the whole thing.
Exactly. If overarching universal laws grant hypocritical exceptions to the executive, the whole system crashes. The sovereign code is destroyed.
You are identifying the exact crisis that any rational systems architect would flag here. In an objective study, a flawless text cannot contradict itself.
Right.
You can't establish a universal law of gravity that dictates how all matter behaves, and then randomly write an exception that gravity just, turns off on Tuesdays for the CEO of the physics department.
That would be absurd.
It violates the fundamental premise of a closed, perfect system.
And look, I mean, human history is full of leaders who write laws for the peasants and exceptions for themselves. We see it all the time.
Of course.
But if we are treating this text as a divine or flawless operating system, it cannot succumb to human hypocrisy. The universe doesn't do arbitrary favors.
Precisely. So if there is a contradiction, the flaw is not in the source code.
Where is it then?
The flaw is in the compilation. The flaw is in how the user is reading it. To resolve this, the author argues that we cannot rely on centuries of user manuals, the traditional history, that were written long after the original system was launched.
Because those manuals are buggy too.
Exactly. They are layered with human assumptions, cultural biases, political agendas, and just linguistic drift over time.
So if we want to know why the system seems to be crashing, we have to bypass the user interface entirely.
Yes. We must look at the original source code. We have to zoom all the way in on the foundational Arabic roots.
Okay, let's get into the code then.
Right, because the core of this entire historical contradiction stems from humanity confusing two completely different structural concepts. We have to isolate the variables.
Two terms that history just improperly merged into one.
Exactly. And the author's approach here requires a paradigm shift in how we understand language itself.
How so?
Well, we aren't just reading words on a page. Think of these linguistic roots as deep, encrypted data packets. If you were monitoring the system, you wouldn't just hear a voice reading a story.
What would you hear?
You'd hear the raw processing of data. Imagine layers of whispered letters like N, K, H, Z, W, J, just pinging against each other in the background, being slowly decrypted by the mainframe to reveal their underlying structural directives.
Oh, wow. I love that sonic metaphor. Hearing the roots, like packets of data being processed.
It is a highly accurate way to conceptualize Semitic languages, and Arabic in particular. The language is built on a triliteral root system. 3 consonants act as the DNA for a vast array of interconnected meanings.
The base data packets.
Right. So let's extract the first one. The root used in the strict regulatory law of Surah 4.3. The root is Nunkaffa, N-K-H.
And the term is Nikah.
Yes.
And just to be totally clear, this is the word that traditional history translates universally as marriage, correct?
Yes, that is the colloquial translation. But when we apply a systemic analysis, marriage is way too culturally loaded and imprecise.
Because it comes with all our modern assumptions about weddings and romance.
Exactly. We need to look at the mechanical definition of the root NKH. Within the architecture of the language, these letters represent the creation of a secure
persistent biological container. Okay, so we are talking about the mechanics of reproduction and domesticity here.
Exactly. In its practical human application, NKH is the precise legal, social, and physical contract of domestic biological marriage.
Okay.
It is a structure specifically designed to contain life, physically generate a family, and manage household resources over a long-term horizon.
So it's inherently tied to biology.
Yes. Biology, domesticity, and the generation of the next generation. That is the specific action that biological merging that is strictly limited and heavily regulated in the code of Surah 4.3.
And honestly, that makes profound logical sense from a systems perspective. I mean, the generation of new life, the merging of assets, the biological vulnerability of reproduction, that is the most critical process in any mammalian society.
Without a doubt.
You want to heavily regulate the biological incubator so it doesn't get exploited, and you tie its expansion to the protection of the most vulnerable nodes in the system, which are the orphans.
Exactly. That is the logic of NKH.
Okay, so that's NKH, the biological container. But now we look at the problematic verse, the one about the leader and the supposed adopted son, Zayd, Surah 33.37.
Right.
And the critical data point here is that the text does not use NKH.
It absolutely does not.
Yeah.
The sovereign code completely abandons the root NKH in this verse. Instead, it deploys an entirely different triliteral root.
Which is?
Zawj, ZWJ. The term is Zawj.
All right, let's run the decryption on ZWJ. What does this root actually dictate in the code base?
The letters ZWJ represent the linking or coordinating of two distinct elements to achieve incremental growth, or to complete a specific task.
So not an incubator.
No, it is a functional counterpart, a pair, or a coupled responsibility.
A functional pairing. Give me a tangible example of how that works outside of, a domestic context.
Sure. The most common example is a pair of shoes.
Pair shoes.
Yeah. A single shoe is essentially useless for its intended systemic purpose, right?
Yeah.
But when you couple it with its counterpart, you form a Zawj. You have created a functional pair that allows for locomotion.
Okay, that makes sense.
Or to elevate the analogy to an organizational level, imagine two colleagues, like perhaps an analyst and a data scientist collaborating on a really complex predictive model.
Oh, I see.
Together, they form a Zawj. They are a functional pair coordinating to complete a localized task.
So it's a functional synthesis. But here is the critical distinction, if I'm understanding this right. The concept of Zawj intrinsically contains zero romantic or biological meaning.
Absolutely none. It dictates functional coordination. If biology or reproduction is involved, the system defaults to NKH.
But if pure functional pairing is involved, it uses ZWJ.
Precisely.
I understand the theoretical distinction, but let me challenge this methodology for a second. Because language is incredibly messy. It is not math.
That's a fair point.
Humans use words poorly, meanings drift, idioms develop over time. We know that in modern Arabic, Zawj is universally used to mean spouse or husband and wife.
It is, yes.
So how can we be certain that in this specific ancient context, the text isn't just using Zawj as a synonym for spouse? Aren't we in danger of modern confirmation bias here? Like just playing with dictionary definitions until we find a loophole that makes an uncomfortable historical contradiction disappear?
That is the necessary skeptical approach, and we have to address it. Because if we were just cherry-picking definitions from a lexicon, this would be an exercise in apologetics, not structural analysis.
Right. So how do we prove it?
To prove that Zawj does not mean biological spouse in this system, we cannot look outside the text. We can't look at modern dictionaries. We must rely on the system's own internal logic.
Okay.
We have to run an internal cross-reference to see how the operating system itself defines and deploys the variable ZWJ in a completely non-domestic context.
So it's like searching a massive code base to see how a specific function behaves when it's called in completely different modules.
Exactly.
And if it behaves mathematically the same way everywhere, we know its true definition.
Precisely. And the most definitive module to examine for this is Surah At-Takwir, chapter 81, verse 7.
What happens in that verse?
This verse is describing a massive future eschatological event, a cosmic day of judgment and systemic reorganization. And the text states, and when the souls are paired or coupled, the precise Arabic phrasing is wa'ida an-nufusu zuwijat.
Wa'ita anufusu zuwijat. When the souls are paired.
Right. Look at the sheer scale of what is being described there. This verse outlines a process where billions of human consciousnesses are sorted and grouped together based on their systemic alignment.
Wait, so like sorting them into categories?
Exactly. The honest are grouped with the honest, the corrupt with the corrupt, the innovators with the innovators. It is a massive, universal sorting algorithm executing at the end of time.
So it's literally a database running a group by similarity function.
Yes. It is a functional grouping based on shared characteristics, and it clearly has absolutely nothing to do with biological weddings or domestic contracts.
Well, yeah, the idea that billions of souls are suddenly performing biological marriage ceremonies in the middle of a cosmic sorting event is logistically and structurally absurd.
Exactly.
Right? There's no biological incubator being formed during a cosmic apocalypse.
Therefore, the internal logic of the text strictly defines the root ZWJ as a functional structural pairing. It does not mean domestic marriage.
Okay, I see where this is going.
So when we return to the supposedly scandalous verse, 33.37, and we look at the phrase deployed by the overarching system toward the leader, the word is Zawajnaka.
And based purely on the system's own encrypted dictionary, what does that translate to?
It translates to, we coupled it, or her, to you as a responsibility. It categorically does not mean we performed a biological wedding ceremony for you.
Oh, wow. If that's true, the implications are just staggering. Because if a biological marriage isn't happening here, if the text is strictly describing the functional pairing of a responsibility, then the entire historical narrative of a scandalous wedding evaporates.
It completely vanishes.
But it leaves a massive gap. Because what exactly is going on in this sector of the code? If this isn't a soap opera about an adopted son and his wife, then why is there a character named Zayd at the center of this functional pairing?
That is the next variable we have to decode.
Right, to understand the equation, we have to isolate it. Who or what is Zayd?
This is where the structural theory of J.R. Ahmed introduces a really profound paradigm shift. Within the strict architecture of the Quranic operating system, names are not arbitrary social labels.
So they aren't just historical placeholders. They aren't just random individuals named Bob or Gary who happen to walk into the narrative.
No, absolutely not. They represent precise functional parameters or systemic states. And what makes the term Zayd so critical to this analysis is its frequency.
How often does it show up?
The term Zayd appears explicitly in the payload of the text exactly one time, only in this specific verse, 33.37.
Are you kidding? A text of over 6,000 verses detailing massive structural laws, and this variable is called only once.
Only once.
From a data architecture standpoint, a single-use variable in a dense code base is a highly critical node. It is a targeted insertion.
It's a surgical strike of data, yes.
Yeah.
To understand it, we cannot rely on centuries of folklore about a man who was allegedly the leader's adopted son. If we are treating the text as an objective architecture, we have to look at the math behind the name.
Okay, how do we do that?
We have to apply what the author terms the Atomic Semantic Extraction Protocol.
The Atomic Semantic Extraction Protocol. That sounds like a concept from quantum computing.
It does, doesn't it?
But practically, how do you extract semantics atomically from an ancient language? Are we assuming that individual letters inherently possess physical meaning?
We are. And this is not magic. It is rooted in the evolutionary history of Semitic languages. This is the field of phonosemantics.
Phonosemantics.
Right. Thousands of years ago, when early nomadic tribes were developing the foundations of these root languages, they didn't have abstract philosophical dictionaries. Language evolved as a direct mimicry of physical reality and thermodynamics. Sounds were mapped to physical actions.
So it's like onomatopoeia on a foundational scale.
Exactly. The phonetic vibration of a consonant in the human throat was tied to the kinetic reality it described. So, the Atomic Semantic Extraction Protocol is a methodology that bypasses centuries of semantic entropy.
The decay, the shifting, the cultural distortion of meaning over time.
Exactly. It bypasses all of that and breaks down the term Zayd into its three alphanumeric primes, the root letters, Za, Ye, and Dal, ZYD.
Okay, let's run the protocol. Let's break down the variables, starting with the first phonetic prime. What is Ze?
The first consonant is Ze. In the phonosemantic architecture, the sound of Ze represents the principle of intense force, displacement, or sharp propulsion.
Like the phonetic equivalent of kinetic energy, the sharp, zzz of a buzzing insect, or the sound of a strike cutting through the air.
Precisely. It is a high-energy push. It denotes a rapid movement or a sharp force that penetrates existing boundaries to propel a system forward. It is not a gentle glide, It is an ignition.
An ignition.
Think of a drill biting into a solid surface or the initial thrust of a propulsion engine. That intense, penetrating initiation of force is that.
The initiation of force, the kinetic spark. Okay, I follow that. What is the second variable?
The second letter is Ya. In the structural matrix, Ya represents the principle of active flow, fluidity, or continuous energy transmission.
So the initial kinetic spark of the Za is now sustained. It becomes a flow.
Yes, exactly. The Ya provides continuity. It is ongoing processing. It is the fluid transmission of energy or data along a vector.
Okay.
If Za is the engine igniting, Ya is the steady, continuous thrust of the exhaust pushing the vehicle through the atmosphere. It transforms a singular event into an active, flowing state.
Right, so we have the force and we have the flow. What is the final prime? What does the Dal do?
The final consonant is Dal. This represents the principle of structural containment, anchoring, or the establishment of a boundary.
Well, that makes sense. The energy has to land somewhere. It can't just flow infinitely.
It must be anchored to actually affect the system. Dal represents a fixed state, a logical boundary, or a structure that establishes a localized presence. It is the destination where the flowing energy lands and builds a new container or a new baseline.
Okay, let's compile this equation. We have Z, which is kinetic force, plus Y, active flow, plus D, structural containment. What is the mathematical output of this linguistic formula?
When you sequentially map these phonetic primes as a unified equation, the root, ZYD, translates to an intense force, Za, that actively flows or transmits energy, Ya, to push past an existing boundary and establish a new, expanded structural containment, Tha.
That is That is literally a mechanical definition of growth.
It is the literal alphanumeric calculation for accumulation, incremental growth, or surpassing a baseline. Therefore, within the objective architecture of the text, the term Zayd does not represent an individual human being.
Wait, it represents a systemic expansion phase.
Exactly. It is an expansion phase.
It's a phase of growth, an autonomous task force pushing a boundary. But again, I have to play the skeptic here.
Please do.
It is incredibly elegant. It forms this beautiful logical puzzle. But how do we know this isn't just an exercise in pareidolia, like seeing faces in the clouds just because we want to see them?
That's the danger, yes.
How do we verify that this specific phonosemantic formula is actually how the operating system utilizes the root ZYD, and not just a clever modern interpretation cooked up to solve this puzzle?
It's a vital question. The only way to combat the accusation of pareidolia is through relentless consistency. We verify this through a systemic process called tasrif, which means the internal cross-referencing and circulation of a root throughout the entire text. We discard external literature. We discard the historical gossip. We query the database for every instance where the unified system deploys this exact root, ZYD.
And if the theory holds?
If the phonetic formula of an expansion phase is objectively true, it must execute flawlessly in every single context without exception.
All right, let's query the database. Show me the internal consistency. Where else does the system run the ZYD protocol, and how does it map to an expansion phase?
Let's look at a completely different sector. Surah Ibrahim, chapter 14, verse 7. The overarching system is addressing its subjects, and it states, "If you are grateful, I will surely increase you." The Arabic term deployed for increase you is la azadanakum, which is built directly on the root ZYD.
I will surely increase you. Okay, but how does that map to the phonetic formula?
Well, in systemic terms, what is gratitude?
Being thankful.
Practically, yes, but structurally. It is when a node in a network correctly processes the data it receives and aligns with the system's parameters.
Ah, okay.
Because the user is grateful, meaning they are aligned and functioning correctly, the overarching system injects an expansion phase. It augments their resources. It applies the intense force, Z flowing Y, to establish a new, higher baseline of containment, D. It increases them.
Okay, wow, that maps perfectly. The ZYD root operates as an injection of resources. Give me another query. Let's test it again.
All right, Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 247. This sector is discussing the selection of a leader, a king named Talut, and the text justifies his leadership by stating, "And he has increased him abundantly in knowledge and stature." The critical word there is wazadahu.
Wazadahu, increased him. Again, the ZYD root.
Exactly, and look at what is being expanded. The term dictates the augmentation of an agent's internal processing capacity, their knowledge, and their physical structural hardware, their stature.
It is a literal expansion phase of the individual's capabilities beyond the standard baseline of the population.
Right, extending the hardware and the processing capacity.
It is entirely consistent with the ZYD formula. Is there another instance we can test just to be absolutely sure?
We can test Surah Al-Kahf, chapter 18, verse 13. This narrative sector details a group of youths who maintain their systemic integrity in a corrupt environment. The text states, "And we increase them in guidance." Was it no?
Increase them in guidance. Was it no?
Here, the ZYD root denotes the continuous acceleration and accumulation of the guidance signal within their cognitive processor. Rationally, logically, and mathematically, across every instance in the database, the root ZYD consistently signifies systemic expansion.
Augmentation.
Yes, or the addition of an active kinetic component to elevate a structure's baseline state. It never, in any of these contexts, refers to a human being named Zayd.
Okay, the methodology is rigorous.
All right.
I'm convinced we have successfully isolated and decrypted the corrupted variables here.
We have.
We have established that Zawj equals a paired responsibility or functional counterpart, not a biological marriage. And we have established that Zayd equals a systemic expansion phase, or a temporary task force pushing a boundary, not an adopted son.
Exactly.
So the crucial question is, what is the output? When we take these clean decrypted variables and plug them back into the supposedly scandalous code of verse 33.37, what is the verse actually communicating to us?
When you plug the correct linguistic firmware back into the verse, the entire scandalous historical narrative of a leader marrying his son's wife simply ceases to exist. It completely evaporates into a mistranslation.
It's just gone.
Gone. What emerges in its place is a profound, high-level analysis of organizational leadership and the unbreakable laws of administrative realignment.
Okay, when you describe administrative realignment, I don't picture a quiet ancient village.
Sure.
No. Given the scale of what this text represents, I picture tectonic plates shifting deep
Oh,
underground.
absolutely.
It's a massive, deep, rumbling realignment of systemic architecture that causes earthquakes on the surface of the organization. Walk us through the mechanics of this earthquake. How does this structural realignment play out in the text?
The author isolates the narrative of this verse into three distinct stages of executive management. Let's begin with stage one, which we can call delegating the task.
The initiation of the project.
Right. In this stage, the central executive leadership, the reformer, assigns a specific, difficult duty, project, or protective role. That task is the Zawj, the functional pairing.
Zawj.
And the leader assigns it to a subordinate or a temporary autonomous team. That team represents the Zawd, the growth or expansion phase.
Okay, so the executive basically says, expansion team, take this paired responsibility, push the boundary, and do the heavy lifting.
Exactly. And the text notes that initially the primary leader tells the subordinate to retain this responsibility. Keep your Zawj. It is standard operational delegation. You deploy a task force to the edge of the network and you tell them to manage the localized problem.
Right, that is standard delegation. You don't micromanage the edge of the network while it's expanding. So that's stage one. What triggers stage two?
Stage two is triggered by completion, we can call it, returning the responsibility.
Returning it.
Eventually, the expansion phase, the Zayd, finishes the core requirement of the task. They break through the boundary, they complete the heavy lifting.
Oh.
At this point, the autonomous team's involvement is no longer systemically necessary. The expansion phase concludes.
The project is basically out of R&D and ready for core integration.
Yes. So, what must structurally happen to the responsibility, the Zawj? It must be detached from the subordinate. The overarching sovereign system then intervenes and directly commands the primary leader. The text states, we structurally attach that responsibility directly to you.
Zawj Nikah. We functionally coupled it to you.
Precisely. The duty, having been developed and stabilized by the expansion team, is now transferred directly back to the central authority for permanent executive oversight. The leader is now functionally paired with the responsibility.
Okay, structurally, that makes perfect sense. The task flows to the edge for development and then flows back to the hub for integration. But, I mean, human organizations aren't just flowcharts.
No, they certainly aren't.
Which brings us to stage three, I imagine, where the human element violently clashes with the structural logic. Stage three is the discomfort. The Arabic term used in the text is karash.
This is the crux of the psychological analysis right here.
Ah.
The text explicitly records that the leader concealed a structural change within himself, fearing the social resistance of the people. He felt a deep internal discomfort, the harash.
But why? Let's dig into the sociology of power dynamics here for a second. If this is just a standard project management issue, delegating a task and then reabsorbing it when it's done, why does the leader feel intense dread?
It's a great question.
Because traditional history claims he was embarrassed because he was secretly lusting after his adopted son's wife, which naturally would cause massive social drama. But we've categorically proven linguistically that this isn't about biological marriage or adopted sons.
Right.
So what is the actual friction here? Why does a rational administrative realignment cause such intense psychological distress for a leader?
Because human beings inherently despise centralization, and organizations are subject to thermodynamic entropy.
Wow. Okay. Break that down.
The true discomfort, the actual friction, is the intense social awkwardness and political dread an executive feels when reabsorbing a task, a resource, or a role that was previously given to an autonomous branch or a subordinate.
Because it looks like a power grab.
Exactly. Think about the sociology of the edge versus the hub. When a leader delegates a massive project to a subordinate, that subordinate gains autonomy, prestige, and power. They become the public face of that expansion.
Right.
If the central leader suddenly reabsorbs that project, even if it is the absolute correct structural move for the health of the whole system, how does the staff react? How does the public view it?
Oh, they view it as tyranny. They think the leader is stealing credit for the subordinate's hard work right at the finish line.
Right.
Or they assume the subordinate failed and was quietly fired or something.
Yeah.
Or they think the leader is an insecure micromanager who just can't bear to see anyone else succeed. The optics are disastrous.
It is a massive sociological taboo. Society has a visceral reaction against central authority reabsorbing power from the edges. The leader in the text knew this. He knew that executing this structural realignment, taking back the paired responsibility from his expansion team, would cause the community to gossip, to resist, and to question his motives.
So he feared the public pushback. He feared the thermodynamic resistance of the organization.
He did.
That is an incredibly profound and universal leadership struggle. Every executive, every manager, every president faces this. You know you have to do what's structurally right for the organization, like you have to collapse a department or reabsorb a task force, but you are terrified of the optics.
You don't want to demoralize the team.
Or face a mutiny based on rumors. So you hesitate. You hide the necessary change.
And this is exactly where the overarching sovereign system delivers its ultimate correction. The system does not coddle the leader's anxiety, it corrects him.
What does it tell him?
It essentially dictates. A leader must not fear public opinion when reorganizing responsibilities for the greater good of the structure. A leader must execute systemic realignment based purely on objective laws, not on the shifting sands of social approval.
Wow.
You must fear the ultimate source, the objective necessity of the system, not the gossip of the people.
It is demanding absolute structural integrity over public relations. That whole sector of the code is literally a masterclass in overcoming the psychological friction of executive management.
It is. Now, I want to add an important alternate lens here, which the author's source material also addresses, because some might argue that the Zawj in this specific historical context wasn't just an abstract project, but an actual human counterpart.
Like a female operative or an ally who was functionally paired with a subordinate team for a specific social or political task.
Exactly.
Okay, so applying this structural logic to a human resource, how does the logic hold up if the Zawj is a person?
It holds up perfectly, because pairing that female counterpart back to the central reformer simply means absorbing her under his supreme socio-political protection and financial care after her previous arrangement or task at the edge of the network had ended.
Ah, I see. So it's like a CEO pulling a vulnerable operative out of a dismantled task force and giving her an executive role or safe harbor within the central administration.
Precisely. It means providing high-level structural security. What it absolutely does not mean is initiating a physical, biological marriage, a Nikah, that would violate the strict parameters established back in Surah 4.3.
Right, because the code never calls the function NKH for this event. It explicitly calls ZWJ.
Exactly. Whether you interpret the paired responsibility as an abstract administrative project or as a human counterpart requiring high-level protection, it remains a functional administrative pairing. It is not a biological container.
So the system remains closed.
Yes. Therefore, the strict limits of Surah 4.3 remain completely intact, inviolate, and uncontradicted.
This is incredibly dense, but the logic is airtight once you accept the linguistic parameters. But I want to make sure you, the listener, can visualize this without getting lost in all the ancient terminology. We need to elevate this to a modern, high-stakes metaphor.
Let's do that. Imagine the complex ecosystem of a massive, modern tech conglomerate.
Okay, like a trillion-dollar tech company.
Yes, and imagine the ambient hum of that massive corporate structure. It's chaotic, thousands of autonomous teams working, rumors flying on Slack channels, constant thermodynamic friction.
I can practically hear the fluorescent lights buzzing.
Now, as we apply the systemic law we just decoded, I want you to imagine that chaotic corporate hum slowly transforming. It aligns. The friction dissipates, and it swells into a grand, cosmic, harmonious symphony, the sound of flawless universal order when a system operates exactly as designed.
The cosmic symphony of structure. Okay, take us into the company. Who are the players?
Imagine this conglomerate is led by a visionary CEO. The overarching board of directors, representing the objective loss of the system, decrees that the company must navigate a highly volatile new market. Perhaps they need to develop a radical new artificial intelligence architecture.
Okay, a huge initiative.
The CEO knows this is dangerous, difficult work, so he delegates this critical project to a highly autonomous black box R&D team.
So the AI project is the Zawj, the functional paired responsibility. And the black box R&D team is the Zayd, the expansion phase pushing the boundary.
Exactly. Now, the CEO initially tells the R&D team to keep their heads down, stay isolated, and keep working on the problem. Retain your paired responsibility.
Right, let them work.
They are in the trenches. They are doing the grueling foundational work, navigating the initial failures, and building the core technology.
They're out on the edge of the network, absorbing all the risk.
Right. However, the ultimate efficient blueprint for the company, The overarching plan devised by the board was always that once the R&D team finished the volatile heavy lifting and stabilized the technology, the AI division would be dissolved as an autonomous unit.
And then what?
The project would then be directly attached back to the CEO for final integration into the company's core products.
Well, yeah, because you can't leave your most powerful, critical technology isolated in a rogue R&D lab forever. It has to flow back to the center so it can be deployed across the whole system safely.
Precisely. But here is where the human friction occurs. The CEO knows the structural plan, but he feels deeply awkward executing it. He is worried about the corporate optics.
Ah, the érage, the discomfort.
Yes. He knows the R&D team has been working late nights, bleeding for this project. He feels that if he suddenly dissolves their autonomy and pulls the project back to his desk, the entire company will think he is a tyrant swooping in to steal the credit at the finish line.
He fears they will think he is micromanaging or that he doesn't trust his people.
Right. He feels the psychological discomfort.
The sociology of the edge, resisting the hub. He hesitates because he is afraid of a staff revolt.
Yes, he hides the structural plan because he's paralyzed by the fear of social pushback. But the overarching rules of the system, the objective laws of efficiency and structural health dictated by the board, demand that responsibilities must flow back to the center when a phase is complete.
A localized expansion cannot exist indefinitely.
It must be integrated. So the board steps in, bypasses his anxiety, and says, "We are attaching this project directly to you. Do not fear the corporate gossip.
Wow.
You must execute this structural change, and you must do it publicly so that no leader in this system ever again feels psychological friction or social taboo when they are required to reabsorb a project from a subordinate who has completed their task."
It's setting an unbreakable precedent. It shatters the taboo entirely.
It is the ultimate blueprint for societies, organizations, and leaders. When an expansion phase finishes its job, the functional pairing is naturally and unapologetically passed back to the core. It normalizes the healthy, dynamic flow of responsibility within a system, curing the entropy of human organizations.
And the absolute genius of this analysis in the resolution to the glitch we started with is that because there is zero biological marriage happening in this corporate realignment, because we are dealing strictly with the Zawj, a functional project pairing, and not a Nikah, a biological container,
Yeah.
there is absolutely zero contradiction with the strict regulatory rules of Surah 4.3.
The glitch is entirely resolved.
The system operates with perfect, hypocrite-free consistency.
Exactly. No overarching universal laws were broken. No executive administrators were given arbitrary backdoors to behave hypocritically or violate the biological safeguards of the system. It's just pure, elegant, mathematically consistent structural logic.
Let's just take a breath and survey the sheer scope of the journey we've been on today. We started with what appeared to be a massive historical contradiction, a supposed glitch that has baffled critics and forced theologians into defensive contortions for centuries.
The accusation that a supreme leader was granted a hypocritical loophole to break the laws of marriage.
Exactly. But by stripping away the centuries of biased user manuals, by treating the text as a flawless, living operating system, and by decrypting the raw linguistic firmware of the original Arabic roots, understanding the profound difference between NKH and ZWJ and the phonosemantic parameters of ZYD, we discovered something entirely different.
We discovered that the text wasn't talking about a domestic scandal at all.
No.
We found a highly sophisticated, mathematically consistent exploration of the psychological friction leaders face when managing structural realignments and the thermodynamics of power.
And there is a deeply practical, resonant application here for you, the listener. Think about the architecture of your own life, your own business, or your own community dynamics. How often do we let the fear of social awkwardness, the dread of looking like a micromanager, or the anxiety of what people will say, paralyze us from making a necessary structural change?
It happens all the time.
This deep dive is a reminder that the flow of responsibility must remain dynamic. You shouldn't fear reabsorbing responsibilities when a phase of growth is complete. If you delegate something and the objective time comes to pull it back to the center for the health of the overall system, you cannot let social taboo prevent you from executing that change.
No, you must align your actions with the objective reality of the situation, not the fear of public opinion.
It ultimately comes down to having the courage to maintain the absolute integrity of your own structural architecture, regardless of the thermodynamic noise and friction generated by the people around you.
I couldn't agree more.
And as we close out this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought to turn over in your mind. Think about the sheer staggering scale of what we just mapped out today.
The implications are massive.
If a massive civilization-defining narrative, a story that has shaped the laws, cultures, and criticisms of billions of people for over a millennium, could be entirely fundamentally misunderstood simply by swapping the definition of two root words.
Confusing a biological incubator with a functional project pairing.
Right. What other foundational codes in human history are currently sitting in plain sight, completely misinterpreted? What other massive cultural operating systems are waiting for someone to finally bypass the centuries of gossip, discard the flawed user manuals, and just read the original source code?
It forces you to wonder how many other historical glitches and ancient contradictions are just mistranslations of a much more elegant, perfect architecture.
It really does. It changes how you view history itself. So next time you hear a rhythmic pulse that blooms into the complex, chaotic hum of a massive system, remember that the underlying code is often flawless. The glitch is usually in how we are reading it. It's just waiting for us to decrypt it. Keep digging, keep questioning the interface, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.